Brenden Slaughter, BeaversEdge.com, coming to you live from the terrace level here at Reser Stadium. Following Oregon State's big win over number 10 Utah, the Beavers take down the Utes 21-7 and improve to 4-1 on the season, even up at 1-1 in Pac-12 play following the loss to Washington State a week ago. Really is a tale of 2 weeks, as Oregon State last week had some up and down play, particularly to open that game against Washington State. It was not good. They were able to kind of fight back and get into that game late, but just, a completely different tale of the tape here tonight. Oregon State, right away, they kick the ball off to Utah after winning the coin toss, stop Utah right away, get the ball back themselves, go down the field, take a commanding 7-0 lead. Then things kind of evened out again. I mean, going back to this game itself, you talk about the defense in this game. The Beavers and Utes really kind of traded punches in this game, and you knew coming into it with Cam Rising being out for Utah, they were going to hang their hat on defense. It's how they were able to get the win last week against UCLA while only scoring 7 offensive points. They were able to get the pick 6. But here on the road, Utah's luck without Cam Rising ran out. The offense just looked completely out of sorts for the Utes. Oregon State was able to harass Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes. Whether or not it was injury-related or play-related, the Utes ended up kind of going back and forth. They went to Barnes. Barnes ended up getting knocked around a little bit too. They went back to Johnson. I believe Johnson finished out the game. But again, Oregon State was harassing these Utah quarterbacks and really made life difficult on Utah. I mean, again, talking about what we mentioned, obviously Oregon State takes that 7-0 lead early in the game, and then no scoring again until the third and the fourth quarter. Oregon State hits a huge play. Silas Bolden, a big-time touchdown pass right here on the near sideline from us, behind us, where he's able to catch that pass, make a juke move at about the 10, and break through his defender and basically walk into the end zone to put Oregon State up 14-0 in the second half. Then the final score was on a 4th and 1. Oregon State decided to go for it. They line up in a heavy formation. DJ pitches it to Silas Bolden, and he takes it 45 yards for the distance, and that ended up giving Oregon State their 21. The Beavers were flirting with their first Pac-12 shutout since the Toilet Bowl in the 80s, folks, but ultimately Utah was able to get on the board with a late score, and that was ultimately all the Utes would get from there, as the Beavers ended up locking down the game, and the final score was 21-7. But again, you go back to what this game meant to Oregon State. A loss would have likely meant their Pac-12 title hopes would be on ice, so to speak, and even though a team made it in with 2 losses last year in Pac-12 play, it's an uphill battle. Oregon State definitely wanted to get back to their winning ways after a week ago, and then you've got to credit to their effort. We talked to Easton Mascarenas, DJ Uyunglele, and a couple others in the press conference, and they all mentioned this was an incredible week of practice. Easton specifically on the defense said Trent Bray got after him this week, and we didn't get a chance to talk to the defense this week, so I think that kind of spoke volumes to how they kind of wanted to quietly go about their business. And again, holding Utah in this matchup to just 198 offensive yards. Again, Utah hadn't been themselves without Cam Rising. It had been, some cracks. They really need him back to be as good of a team that they are. But nevertheless, credit to Oregon State for being able to limit Utah's production throughout the night and really making things tough. I mean, you look at the run defense was solid, allowed some yards here and there, but forced Utah into 6 punts. Oregon State had 7 themselves, but Oregon State was able to hit those big plays more than Utah was. I mean, you look at this game, and it's not like Oregon State was world-beating offensively, but you look at that Utah defense and what we talked about at BeaversEdge.com this week, how we felt from our research and talking to our sister site over at Ute Nation that this was one of the best defenses Kyle Whittingham has ever had at Utah, and I think that speaks volumes to the credit of this offensive staff and just Oregon State's rather patience in continuing to work through this game and taking the shots when they were available, and more importantly than anything, riding this home crowd's energy. Obviously UC Davis was a big atmosphere for the first game in this stadium. San Diego State, a lot different, bit of a snoozer in my opinion. But today, that press box up there, as I'm pointing right here, is sealed for the most part, so we don't hear a ton of audio. We could hear everything today. So Beaver Nation, Jonathan Smith, the players mentioned it as well. They definitely made a difference, so to speak, and I think that's huge. I mean, obviously Utah coming in, they were still a top 10 team, and after Oregon State fell to Washington State last week, they needed a signature win to kind of get themselves back in the mix, and you have to credit to them for being able to ultimately get it done. I mean, just some stats that stand out. Damian Martinez goes for 71 yards. He gets the touchdown, obviously that first touchdown that we mentioned. Impressive drive by Oregon State. There was a DJ Uyunglele run in there too. He looked a lot more comfortable today. He obviously still 14 of 25 for 204 yards. 1 touchdown also. And, you know, more than anything, he was able to link up with Silas Bolden, with Cyrus Bolden goes 6 for 100 and a touchdown, and then also adds 53 yards rushing on the ground and a touchdown. Silas, almost a career game for him as far as getting the rushing and the passing, so a lot to like there. And then, you know, more than anything, Oregon State's defense, as I mentioned, harassing Nate Johnson. He went 8 of 23 for 101 yards, sacked twice. Bryson Barnes, 5 of 8 for 40. He was sacked once. It didn't matter what Utah did offensively in this game. They were able to get some runs. You know, Glover ended up with 60 yards, or 58 yards, excuse me. But for the most part, Oregon State was really able to limit everything Utah was trying to get in this game. So, again, a huge statement from Oregon State defense, especially last week when we saw Cam Ward pick apart this defense. Granted, Utah, Washington State, very different offensive teams. Utah, like Oregon State, going to lead with the run, and Oregon State, to their credit, strong run defense team. Secondary still putting some pieces together, but I thought today the secondary really did step up. Again, hard to say because I don't think Bryson Barnes or Nate Johnson is nearly the threat that Cam Ward is, or some of these other quarterbacks we'll see in the Pac-12 slate this year. But, you know, going back to that, you know, whether it was Katana Ladapo, you know, Noble Thomas played a big role today. Jaden Robinson ultimately left the game in the first half. He had a hamstring injury. Jonathan Smith says we'll see what his status is. A couple other guys, James Rawls, Calvin Hart Jr. also get targeting violations. They ejected out of this game. They'll miss the first half of the game against Cal this next week. And then, you know, following all of that, Oregon State, you know, was still able to continuously play well on the defensive side of the ball. If there's an area that, you know, Oregon State, you know, would like to clean up, it's probably the penalties in this game. 11 for 100 yards. It's more than you'd like, but again, in a winning formula, they were all smiles across Beavers locker room because they knew they got the job done. And, you know, while you can, you know, maybe break this down in many different ways, Utah wasn't at full strength or what have you, so still a top 10 team and still a huge win that Oregon State needed. They treated it like a must win, and they came in and they played like it. So an impressive win for Oregon State. National TV Friday, everybody was paying attention to the Beavers, so that's definitely big as we lead into this next week. And Oregon State will take on Cal this next weekend down in the Bay Area, so make sure to stay locked to BeaversEdge.com as we'll have complete coverage of that. But again, signing off from here at Reser Stadium, Oregon State takes down number 10 Utah 21-7. The Beavers are likely to jump back up in the polls. They could get, you know, close to where they were, you know, prior to the loss to Washington State. I think they'll be at least top 15, but regardless, a huge win for Oregon State. Massive bounce back. They keep their Pac-12 title game hopes afloat and alive, and now they enter a stretch of the schedule that isn't quite as daunting as they've had recently. Again, a matchup with Cal and UCLA on deck before the bye week coming up after that. So again, stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com. This is Brenden Slaughter signing off from Reser Stadium.